Hello everyone and welcome back to class 11 biology. Today we shall start a new chapter, chapter 7, structural organization in animals. So in this chapter we are going to study only animal tissue according to the revised syllabus. So under this chapter the instructional objectives are, by the end of this class you will be able to classify animal tissues into 4 basic types. Differentiate simple and compound epithelial tissue. Compare loose and dense connective tissue. List out the differences between skeletal muscles and cardiac muscles. Explain the role of neuron in body function. Okay, so all the organisms, it can be either unicellular or it can be multicellular. So if you look at this unicellular organism, okay, so the picture shown here is that of paramecium, which is a unicellular organism, and this unicellular organism, which is composed of only a single cell, they are able to perform all the physiological function. Okay, for example, this cell is able to do respiration, digestion, excretion, reproduction, movement, and everything. Okay, so such as function which is performed by single cell in unicellular organism are also seen in multicellular organism like human. So in the case of human body, we have trillions of cells. Okay, and these different cells are also able to perform the function, but they are specialized. Each individual cell cannot perform all the functions. Okay, they are grouped and then work towards a common function. So this we can study under organization, levels of organization in an organism. Okay, so here is an individual cell. Now number of similar cell, when they work together to perform a particular function, then it forms a tissue. And this tissue again, number of tissues, different tissues, and if we work together to perform a common function, then it forms an organ. Here, this is a stomach. Again, number of organs when they work in coordination for a particular purpose. So here, let us say digestion. So this forms an organ system. And number of organ system, for example here the organ system shown is digestive system. Likewise we have respiratory system, circulatory system, endocrine system, and so on. And all these different systems, again when they work in coordination, then it forms an organism. Okay, so in this chapter we'll be talking only at this level, that is tissue. Okay, so animal tissue. This animal tissue consists of number of animal cells which work together to perform a common function. Okay, so a number of cells working together to perform a common function, it constitutes a tissue. Okay, so the animal tissues are broadly classified into 4 categories. These are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue. So these epithelial tissues are usually found as a lining of the duct or as a covering from the external environment. Okay, so that is protective as well as lining of the inner tissue. Next is connective tissue. So this connective tissue, it links the tissues, it links the organ and tissues, connective tissue. And the third one is muscular tissue. So muscular tissues are composed of muscle cells, and these are responsible for our coordinated movement and locomotion. And the last category is nervous tissues, and nervous tissues are the main controlling tissues in our body for our proper coordination and proper control of a functioning in the body. Okay, so let us talk about each one. Okay, there is epithelial, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissues one by one. So in the first video, we'll be talking only about epithelial tissue. Okay, in this we'll be talking only about epithelial tissue. So this epithelial tissue, they usually has a free surface. They usually have a free surface. That means this free surface, it may face either the body fluid or it can face the outside environment. And when they face the body fluid, it forms a lining. It forms a lining of a cavity, or you can say tubule or the ducts. And when they face outside environment, it acts as a protective. For example, like skin. Okay, so when they when they are found outside towards the outside environment, they are protective in nature. And the second important point about the epithelial tissue is the cells are compactly packed with a very less intercellular space containing the matrix. So very less intercellular matrix. Okay, so these are the two important points regarding epithelial tissue. Now, this epithelial tissue, it comes in three basic shapes. So these shapes are flat. It can be flat, and if it is flat, we call it as squamous. It can be cube-like, then we call it as cuboidal, or it can be long and slender, that is pillar-like, we call it as columnar. Okay, so epithelial tissue, the basic shapes are squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. Now, this tissue, it can come in a single layer like this, single layer, or it can be of multiple layer, that is more than, two layers, two or more layers here. So if it is of a single layered tissue, then we call it as simple epithelial tissue, simple epithelial tissue. And if it is more than two or more layers of cells, then we call it as compound epithelial tissue or stratified tissue. Is it clear? So based on the number of layers, the epithelial tissues are classified into simple and compound epithelial tissue. Now let us look at the simple epithelial tissues. So these simple epithelial tissues, as discussed earlier, of course it has three basic shapes. So if it is flat like this, you can see that this is a squamous epithelial tissue or squamous epithelium. The flat tissues here, and if you look from the top, it is irregular shape here, irregular shape, and the cells in all the case are compactly packed, and there is very less intercellular space here. You cannot see here, but the intercellular space is very less between the adjacent cells. And in all the epithelial tissues, whether it be squamous, cuboidal, or columnar, these tissues are placed on a basement membrane or basement substance. These are the non-cellular structure called as basement membrane or basement membrane. Yes. So this squamous epithelium, these are the flat structure, as you can see here. These are flat, very thin, and cuboidal, you can find that it is cube-like structure, and columnar, it is very long and slender like a pillar. So again, if you look at the position of the nucleus in each of the cells, in the case of flattened, that is squamous and cuboidal, the nucleus are towards the center of the cell. But in the case of columnar, it is at the basal. It's not in the center, it is at a basal position. And this squamous and cuboidal and columnar, it may also bear a cilia. So you know that cilia are the hair-like structure which beat constantly, in a particular direction. So if the cilia is present, then we call it as ciliated epithelium. So it can be cuboidal or it can be columnar. Now let us see where are they found and how do they function. So first one is squamous epithelium. So squamous epithelium, as I discussed, these cells are always placed. Underneath there is a basal lamina here, basal membrane, or basement membrane. So these cells are flat and thin, and they are usually found in the alveoli. So that is air sacs of lung. You know that lungs is a respiratory system. So organ is a respiratory organ inside which you can see number of tubes which divides into still finer tubes and finally terminating into a sac-like structure called as alveoli. sac-like structure called as alveoli, where the exchange of gas, that is the diffusion of gas, takes place. Okay, so in order to facilitate the diffusion of gas across the lungs, that is across the alveoli, okay, then in order to facilitate the diffusion, the layer must be very thin, okay, which is already there. That is a presence of simple squamous epithelium. So since it is very thin, it acts as a diffusion boundary. It acts as a diffusion boundary. It helps in the diffusion of gas here. Likewise, this simple squamous epithelium is also present in the blood vessels. Okay, as you know, especially that of capillaries. Okay, again here, these are the very fine tubes where the exchange of gas takes place. Okay, so these capillaries are again composed, or you can say it is lined. It is lined by simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so the simple squamous epithelium, it helps in the diffusion of gas as well as, okay, especially the gas. Okay, it helps in the diffusion. Now next is simple cuboidal epithelium. Simple cuboidal here, simple, it is a single layered and it is a cube-like shape. Okay, simple cuboidal epithelium, and here you can see that the structure is shown here is a tubular here. So these cells line the tubes. Okay, and this tube, for example, let us say in the kidney, we know that the structural and functional unit of a kidney is a nephron. And in the nephron, there are tubes like PCT, that is proximal convoluted tubules, and DCT, that is distal convoluted tubules. So in these tubules, okay, in these tubules, these tubules are lined by simple cuboidal epithelium, and inside this there's a fluid, filtrate formed in the kidney. Now, what do? They help in secretion as well as absorption of important minerals and secretion of unwanted mineral into the fluid, okay, so that it can be discharged out of the body. Simple cuboidal epithelium. So one such location is in kidney. Now the third type is simple columnar epithelium. Simple because it is a single layered, okay, and then it's a pillar-like, that is columnar. So these are present, okay, in the intestine here. So this simple columnar, it may bear a cilia. Here you can see hair-like. Then we call it as ciliated epithelium. And such a ciliated epithelium is found in respiratory tract. So in the respiratory tract, during breathing, what happens is that, okay, some external particle may get into our body. So in order to, okay, remove it out, what they do is the cilia will beat in a particular direction, so that it can be removed out of the body. Okay, so likewise, we can also find a ciliated epithelium in the fallopian tube. So fallopian tube is a part of a female reproductive organ. So this fallopian tube, what they do is during the menstrual cycle, okay, especially around the ovulation, the ova is released, and that released ova is collected by the fallopian tube, and then it is passed towards the uterus. But the ova is non-motile. Okay, so in order to facilitate the movement of ova towards the uterus, the cells lining them, okay, they are ciliated, and the beating of this cilia, will move the egg towards the uterus. Okay, and then again, this columnar and then cuboidal also, they may also have a villi and microvilli. So villi and microvilli, nothing but these are the finger-like projections, and these finger-like projections increases the surface area, and these are usually found in intestine. We know this intestine is a part of a digestive system. So the digested food, which is moving through the alimentary canal, the digested food like glucose and amino acid, they need to be absorbed by the body. So this absorption is again done by this columnar epithelium, which lines the intestine, and this columnar epithelium has a finger-like projection called villi and microbili, and this increases the surface area. So more the surface area, better will be the absorption. Okay, so this is about simple epithelial tissues. Okay, simple epithelial tissues. Now, these simple epithelial tissues like columnar and cuboidal, as we discussed, they may be ciliated, or it can have a microvilli forming a brush border, and sometimes these columnar cells, columnar epithelium, also get modified so that it can perform the functioning of secretion only, and such a epithelium is called as glandular epithelium. And this glandular epithelium, okay, the function is only secretion. And based on the number of cells, it can be unicellular and it can be multicellular. Unicellular glands, okay, it is nothing but these are the isolated, scattered unicellular cells, okay, which secretes, like for example, goblet cells in the stomach. Okay, goblet cells in the alimentary canal, you can see, okay, they are the secretory in nature. So this is a unicellular gland, or if it is composed of multiple cells, then it is a multicellular glandular epithelium. It has a clusters of cells. So the example given here is that of salivary gland. In our body, we have 3 pairs of salivary gland. These are parotid gland, sublingual gland, and submandibular gland. Okay, so this epithelium, based on the number of cells, we have unicellular and multicellular. Now these glands, based on how they pour the secretion, okay, that is more mode of pouring, we have exocrine gland and endocrine gland. Exocrine glands are the glands with a duct, and endocrines are ductless gland. These are ductless gland. These are with duct. So that means the secretion of them, like mucus, saliva, milk, everything, whatever they secrete, they are secreted and then they pour out. They release out through the duct. Okay, for example, salivary gland here. Okay, now endocrine glands are those glands without duct. So that means the secretion are secreted into the surrounding. That is, they secrete into the blood. So the example is pituitary gland. Pituitary gland secretes hormones, and these hormones are directly released in the blood, and this blood will carry these hormones throughout the body, and then they are received by the target organ or target tissue. And there are certain glands where, or you can say organ, where you will find both exocrine gland and endocrine gland. And such an organ, we call it as heterocrine. For example, like pancreas. So pancreas has both exocrine gland as well as endocrine gland. Now next is compound epithelium. So compound epithelium, this consists of more than 2 layers of cells as discussed. Okay, and these are usually, they are usually found in a body where you'll find more friction. Okay, so that means they have a protective, okay, role. So their role is for protection against the chemical and mechanical stress. Okay, so if you look at the location where you'll find more friction, it can be skin, it is obvious, and then the buccal cavity, pharynx, and then inner lining of ducts of salivary glands and pancreatic ducts. Okay, so these are the place where you find epithelium. Okay, as in the case of simple epithelium, it also has squamous, okay, compound squamous epithelium, compound cuboidal epithelium, compound columnar epithelium. Okay, so the shape, all these 3 shape is also found in compound epithelium. So the picture shown here is that of stratified, okay, squamous epithelium which is found in esophagus. Okay, so what we studied about the epithelial tissue, and these epithelial tissues are divided into 2, that is simple and compound. And in both the case, these 3 shapes of cells are found, that is squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. And again here, talking about their function, in the case of simple epithelium, the function is for diffusion, absorption, and secretion mainly. And in the case of compound epithelium, it is mainly for protection against chemical and mechanical stresses. Well, and then in the very first, during the introduction again about the epithelial tissue, we learned that this epithelial tissue, they have a very less intercellular space, intercellular matrix. Okay, so they are very close, the cell are placed very close to each other, and in such a cells you will also find junctions. There are three types of junction you'll find, that is tight junction. So this tight junction makes sure that the cell will not leak the substance into the neighboring cells or the neighboring tissues. Okay, second one is adhering junction. What it does is it adheres, it cements the neighboring cells. Neighboring cells are placed close together. And the third one is gap junction. This gap junction will facilitate the communication between the tissues by means of transfer of molecules. It can be small molecules or it can be big molecules. Okay, so that's all about the epithelial tissue, and the remaining three tissues we'll discuss in the next video. Thank you.